Hey, folks. It's your boy, the Boss Economist, back at it again to rip apart the latest economic dumpster fire. Today, we're diving headfirst into the French inflation numbers. Spoiler alert, they're dropping faster than a politician's approval rating during a scandal. But don't let the champagne corks pop just yet, because behind this so-called disinflationary triumph lies a steaming pile of government mismanagement, ECB cowardice, and a masterclass in how to tank an economy while pretending everything's fine. So, grab your calculators, your pitchforks, and your anti-establishment rage, let's get into it. Alright, let's set the scene. France's inflation rate just hit a more than 4-year low, clocking in at a measly 0.6% in May 2025, according to the latest data. That's down from an already pathetic 0.9% in April, and it's way below the European Central Bank's sacred 2% target. Energy costs. Down 8.1% year-on-year. Manufactured goods. Down 0.2%. Even services inflation, the golden child of underlying pressures, slowed to 2.1%. Sounds like a dream, right? Prices are cooling, wallets are breathing a sigh of relief, and the ECB is ready to pat itself on the back for taming the inflation beast. But hold up, let's not start handing out Nobel Prizes just yet. Because if you squint past the headlines, you'll see this isn't a victory lap, it's a warning siren. This isn't disinflation in action, as Bank of France head François Villeroy de Galhau smugly declared in his cushy Parisian office. No, this is a neon-lit billboard screaming, your economy is on life support, and your leaders are too busy sipping espresso to notice. And if you think this is just a French problem, think again. This is a Eurozone-wide disaster, with Germany, Italy, and Spain all expected to report sub-2% inflation numbers this week. Buckle up, folks, this is going to be a wild ride. Let's break this down, Boss Economic style, from the nitty-gritty details to the big, ugly picture. We're going to peel back the layers of this economic onion, and trust me, it's going to make your eyes water. First off, let's talk about that 8.1% drop in energy costs. Sounds great, right? Cheaper gas, lower electricity bills, hallelujah, the government's got our backs. Except, wait a minute, energy prices aren't falling because of some brilliant policy move. They're falling because global demand is in the toilet. According to the International Energy Agency's latest World Energy Outlook, global oil demand growth slowed to a mere 900,000 barrels per day in 2024, down from 2.1 million in 2023. Why? Because businesses are scaling back, consumers are tightening their belts, and the Eurozone economy is teetering on the edge of stagnation. And here's the kicker, France, like much of the Eurozone, is still reeling from the energy shock of 2022, when Russia's invasion of Ukraine sent gas prices into the stratosphere. Back then, the French government, under the oh-so-wise leadership of Emmanuel Macron, rolled out massive energy subsidies to cushion the blow. According to the French National Institute of Statistics and Economic Studies, these subsidies cost taxpayers 24 billion euros in 2023 alone. Fast forward to 2025, and what do we have? A government that's now slashing those subsidies because, surprise, the budget deficit is ballooning. Public debt in France hit 112% of GDP in 2024, per Eurostat, and the European Commission is breathing down Macron's neck to tighten the fiscal belt. So, what happens when you yank away the subsidies that were propping up energy demand? You get a collapse in prices, not because the economy is healthy, but because it's running on fumes. This isn't disinflation, this is a demand-side disaster. And guess who's to blame? That's right, the same geniuses in Paris who thought they could subsidize their way out of an energy crisis without a long-term plan. Now, let's zoom out to the broader picture. Inflation below 2% might sound like a dream come true, especially after the 10% peak we saw in 2023, but here's the dirty little secret, low inflation is often a symptom of an economy that's flatlining. And the Eurozone is Exhibit A. According to the European Commission's Spring 2025 economic forecast, Eurozone GDP growth is projected to be a measly 0.8% this year, down from an already pathetic 1.2% in 2024. Unemployment, while still low at 6.5%, is starting to tick up in key economies like France and Italy, where youth unemployment is hovering at 20%. Why is this happening? Because the ECB, in its infinite wisdom, spent the last 2 years jacking up interest rates to fight inflation, only to overshoot and choke off growth. The ECB's deposit rate, currently at 2.25%, is expected to be cut to 2% on June 5, 2025, its 8th cut in this cycle. But let's be real, this is too little, too late. The damage is done. Businesses, especially small and medium enterprises, are drowning in debt. The European Investment Bank's 2024 investment survey found that 45% of Eurozone SMEs reported reduced access to credit in 2024, up from 30% in 2023. And consumers? They're not spending either. Retail sales in the Eurozone fell by 0.7% year-on-year in Q1 2025, per Eurostat, as households hoard cash amid fears of a looming recession. So, when François Villeroy de Galhau calls this encouraging disinflation, what he's really saying is, hey, look, we killed inflation by killing the economy, mission accomplished. And the ECB, instead of admitting its mistakes, is doubling down, claiming it's normalizing monetary policy. Normalizing. This isn't normalization, this is economic malpractice. And the ordinary folks, your baristas, your factory workers, your Uber drivers, are the ones paying the price. Now, let's zoom out even further, because this isn't just about France or the Eurozone, it's about a world economy on the brink, exacerbated by government incompetence and geopolitical chaos. Enter Donald Trump, stage right. The re-elected US president, as of January 2025, is already threatening to slap tariffs on European goods, with a proposed 25% levy on EU exports to the US, according to Bloomberg's reporting in April 2025. This isn't just bluster, it's a dagger aimed at the heart of the Eurozone's export-driven economies. Germany, France, and Italy, whose combined exports to the US totaled $220 billion in 2024, per the US Census Bureau, are staring down the barrel of an economic gun. And what's the EU's response? Crickets. The European Commission, led by Ursula von der Leyen, is too busy bickering over carbon taxes and green energy mandates to mount a coherent defense against Trump's trade war. Meanwhile, national governments like France's are too paralyzed by domestic political gridlock to act. Macron, facing a resurgent far right in the National Assembly, is more focused on saving his political skin than saving the economy. The result? A Eurozone that's sleepwalking into a recession, with inflation numbers that look good on paper but mask a much uglier reality. Alright, folks, let's cut through the jargon and get to the heart of the matter. This French inflation story isn't about disinflation in action or monetary policy normalization. It's about governments and central banks failing at their most basic job, keeping the economy afloat. Let's break down the failures, one by one. The French government's energy subsidies were a classic case of kicking the can down the road. Sure, they kept prices low in 2023, but at what cost? A ballooning deficit, a debt crisis, and now a demand collapse that's dragging inflation into dangerous territory. And it's not just France, look at Germany, where the government's decision to phase out nuclear power has left the country reliant on expensive LNG imports, crippling its industrial base. According to the German Federal Statistical Office, industrial production fell 3.9% year-on-year in Q1 2025. These are self-inflicted wounds, folks, and the politicians in charge are too busy posing for photo ops to care. The ECB's obsession with fighting inflation has turned it into the economic equivalent of a firefighter who burns down the house to put out a kitchen fire. Raising rates to 4.5% in 2023 to combat inflation was understandable, but keeping them elevated well into 2024, even as growth stalled, was sheer madness. And now, with inflation below target, their timid 25 basis point cuts are like putting a band-aid on a gunshot wound. Lithuanian central banker Gediminas Šimkus is right to warn about the risk of undershooting inflation, but where was this urgency a year ago, when businesses were begging for relief? Finally, let's talk about the elephant in the room, global instability. Trump's tariff threats are just the tip of the iceberg. The ongoing war in Ukraine, tensions in the South China Sea, and the collapse of multilateral trade agreements are creating a perfect storm of economic uncertainty. And yet, what do we see from Eurozone leaders? A complete lack of vision. Instead of forging new trade alliances or investing in domestic innovation, they're clinging to outdated models of export-led growth, leaving their economies vulnerable to every geopolitical shockwave. So, what's the takeaway, folks? France's plunging inflation isn't a victory, it's a red flag. It's a symptom of an economy that's been mismanaged into stagnation, propped up by short-term gimmicks, and left exposed to global chaos. And the people responsible, the politicians, the central bankers, the technocrats, are hoping you won't notice. They're hoping you'll see these low inflation numbers and think, hey, everything's fine. But you're smarter than that. You're the Boss Economics crew, and you see through the lies. Here's what we need to do: demand accountability. Demand that government stop papering over cracks with subsidies and start investing in real, sustainable growth. Think infrastructure, think education, think green tech that actually works. Demand that the ECB stop chasing imaginary inflation boogeymen and start supporting businesses and consumers. And demand that our leaders wake up to the geopolitical realities of 2025, because burying their heads in the sand isn't going to cut it. Alright, folks, that's all for today's episode of Boss Economics World, where we expose the clowns, call out the crooks, and fight for the little guy. If you're as fed up as I am, smash that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us how government mismanagement is screwing over your wallet. Until next time, stay sharp, stay angry, and remember, in this economy, you've got to be the boss to survive.